Hi everyone, my name is Renuu, and this is my testimony. It took me a whole year to feel ready to share this, but it's the right time right now, and I am so excited to be here with you guys. So, thank you so much for being here and tuning in. And if any of you guys are new here, welcome to my channel. If you guys know me from my Love Notes from God series, this is the story behind them. And my turning point was at 24 when I opened a Bible for the first time ever after worshiping different gods my whole life. So, yeah, without further ado, let me take you guys back to where it all started, back to my childhood. So, I was born and raised in Nepal, and I lived in the city of Kathmandu. Growing up, I followed both Hinduism and Buddhism, so I worshipped many gods. I also speak my native language, which is Nepali, which, if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's very similar to Hindi. I grew up in a very spiritual environment. There were temples almost in every corner of the street. You'd see a lot of small temples, a lot of big temples, and my mom actually used to take me there ever since I was a little baby. I remember she just used to, carry me around, play with me, and just show me around, and we would just really just hang out. So those places really hold a lot of love and special memories for me. Worship for me in Nepal, worship was an everyday thing. It wasn't really, just on Sundays. Like, it really was an everyday thing. So in my house, I had a prayer space with about 6 or 7 statues of these gods that we worshipped. And every morning, me, my mom, and my grandma would bow down to these statues to worship them and chant prayers. And I remember when I was a kid, when they would, recite all these prayers, I never really understood what they were saying. It was just like repeated phrases and rhythms. So, I memorized the rhythm, but I really had no connection with the words. So to me, God felt like something that was for grown-ups, and God was someone that we had to, constantly please with rituals and all these rules, and always striving to be perfect. Yeah, and then on top of that, we also had our own holidays, which was dedicated to these gods. And in those times, the devotion was even deeper. All the community and all the families and everyone would, really get together at these times and celebrate. And, I took a lot of pride in that. I loved my people. I loved being a Nepali. I loved my culture, my traditions, everything that came with it. I was never ashamed of it. I really saw it as a part of who I was. Yeah, so, but, even though I was surrounded by so much spirituality all around me every single day, right? I wasn't really thinking about God too deeply. I think I didn't really care much. I, you know, learned to have this respect and honor for God, but that was really about it. That was really about it. I grew up watching a lot of Hannah Montana, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, or Wizards of Waverly Place. I mean, I loved those shows. And, I think that's where I kind of picked up a little bit of the American accent as well. I was a very active kid as well. I loved going on hikes with my friends. We used to go on long, long walks. I used to ride in a lot of buses. There's more bikes in Nepal. People ride more on motorbikes in Nepal than in cars and stuff. So, I grew up riding a lot of bikes. So I did that with my cousins, and some of my core memories would really be the holidays, because that's when, all of the cousins and everyone would really gather together, and we would just have such a good time. We would wear traditional clothes, we would have our traditional food, and we would play games, laugh, have sleepovers, and everything. So those were definitely some of my happy moments in Nepal. In my house, it didn't always feel like that. So I grew up in a very large family, including me, my mom, my dad, my sister, my grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt, and my cousin. Yeah, it was a really full house. You see, in Nepal, there's no rule of moving out in 18, so most families stay together for most of their lives. So, so I grew up in a really large family, and there was a lot of chaos at times. There was a lot of yelling and fighting and arguing, crying, and slamming doors. I really didn't know how to handle that heaviness around me. And at this time, I was sharing a room and the bed with my sister. I mean, I did that most of my life. So, I never really had real privacy. Yeah. So, all the fightings and everything made me very scared at those times. I felt a lot of love from my family, but the constant arguments and fights made me very fearful at a young age. Well, because of those experiences, I became the quiet, good kid, and I never added to the tension. I was always, looking out to what was going to happen next, and I learned to really shrink and read the room. I was very hypervigilant about people's moods and emotions. And, without realizing, I was putting other people's feelings above mine, thinking that if they're stable, I'm safe. But even in the middle of all that chaos, I would say my mom was really my soft spot. Just simply her feeding me and giggling with me, smiling at me, or me just sitting in her lap. It really made me feel safe. My life really changed when I was 8 years old, when my mom got admitted to the hospital. She used to get sick very often, but this time when she was in the hospital, she didn't come back home for a while. And I remember asking my dad, like, when is she coming back? When is she coming back? And he would always say soon. So I just waited. And I remember after like a month or so after that, my house was filled with people. And I just thought it was just another festival of ours. So I wasn't really thinking too much about it. And so I was just, playing around in the house. And this moment right here is so vivid for me. something I'll never forget. So I was playing around in the house, and then I remember I was running up the stairs, and then I look to the right towards my dad's room. I see a picture of my mom, and it's surrounded with flowers. That time, that moment right there really felt frozen for me. Like I didn't understand what to think, or I didn't even know how to feel right then. You know, and it was at that time as an 8-year old that I had to form in my mind that she passed away. I didn't even know that she passed away. I had no idea. So that brought so much confusion for me and shock. Like everything was just so heavy, and I didn't know what to do with all those feelings. So, and being a quiet kid, I just bottled everything inside. And I remember I just kept that memory to myself. I never talked about it. After her passing, no one really spoke about her. The silence around her name made everything very uncomfortable and awkward. There wasn't really a good communication, especially between me and my sister and my dad. I feel like we all just kind of coexisted at that time. And it was just confusing. It was really confusing to me. I really felt like, I couldn't talk about her or bring up her name or anything because no one really tried to say anything about her. So I stayed silent too. I just thought as a kid that, okay, it's not, safe for me to bring her up. I don't want to make things weird or anything. And that's how I felt as a kid. So, over the years, I had to bury my emotions, my questions, my thoughts, and just move on. I really had to live like she never existed. But, deep down, I really carried the heaviness and sadness of losing her. So all of this really changed the way I saw the world at a young age. I didn't really get time to process anything. I quickly learned to just move forward without feeling. After that, I had a big transition in my life again. So my dad remarried, and at the age of 14, me, my dad, and my sister, we moved to America with my dad's wife at that time. And then she used to live in Arizona. So that's where we decided to move. This transition was part exciting because everyone dreams to go to America, but part of it was really sad and really scary for me, because I was like, wow, I gotta move to the other side of the world, and I have to leave my grandma, my cousins, my uncle and aunts, and everyone behind. Like, that was really scary to me. Like, I was really scared. I remember I didn't want to move. So fast forward, I'm in America now. And now I'm adjusting to a new environment, a new culture, a new language, and a new mother figure. I remember when I was living with her in her place, it felt really strange to me to call her mom when I hadn't even grieved my own mom. And living with her also really made me realize how much I forgot about my mom and how little I knew of her. I knew nothing about my mom, and I only had one picture of her with me. I didn't even know her birthday, no nothing. And the awkwardness and silence around her name was still present within my family. So, it's really sad that that was there. I really wish that that wasn't the case. But, I feel like we all were kind of just grieving on our own. I don't blame them for that, but I really wish there was some communication going on about her. Cause my mom really felt like a stranger to me, yeah. And the only times that I got reminded of my mom was when other people would ask me about her. And then also at this time, my dad's wife was from Nepal originally. She was a citizen in the States, but she was from Nepal originally, so, we were still following our gods and all the festivals that we used to do. So now, I'm in America adjusting to everything. And when I was 16 years old, my dad's wife put me to work immediately and got me a job at a restaurant. And I also had started high school at this time too, as a sophomore. So I was on full school mode and full work mode. Life at this time felt really rushed for me. Like I just felt like everything was just happening really fast. You know, I have I was adjusting to a new high school, and school is so different in America versus in Nepal. Just the fact that I had to, now speak English every single day, which I wasn't used to. Sorry. I had to speak English every single day, which I wasn't used to. And then let alone, I started work, and I had never worked in my life. So that was a lot for me. Just how the working system is in the States. I was so unfamiliar with everything. So I remember at that time, I was really scared. I was really scared, but, I pushed through. I pushed through though, and because I had no choice. And I'm proud of myself, I'm proud of myself looking back of how I really adjusted to everything. In that heaviness, I really found a lot of distraction and peace with my high school friends. They really became my escape from the heaviness of life. And I was friends with them after that for almost 9 years. And I really considered them my family. So fast forward, when I graduated high school at 18 years old, things started to not be so good between my dad and his wife. So they actually ended up getting a divorce. So now I really, really felt the pressure even more than ever before. We had to move out of our place, and my dad didn't have income at this time, so I really felt the responsibility even more. I really felt like I owed my dad a better life because he brought me to America. So once we, moved out of our place, I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment with my dad and my sister, and I worked really hard. I was already working and I continued working. Now I was really working full time, overtime, and I had also started college. So I was going to a community college at this time. But unfortunately, I dropped out of college after 2 years because of financial struggles and just a lot of stress. A lot of stress. But I was still trying to figure out my career and what I wanted to do in life and still hustling. So, life to me at this point really felt like I was on a constant survival mode. And I wasn't really thinking about God too much still at this time. Like, God never really crossed my mind. I was doing everything on my own strength. I had a lot of self-belief. I was very independent, but I had no guidance and I had no support. And I quickly just became my own parent. And I just solely relied on myself. So when I turned 21, I got my first glimpse of hope when I met my boyfriend, who was a Christian. Yay! That was the time, when I was really introduced to Jesus and what Christian faith really looked like. At this time, I was in Arizona and my boyfriend was in LA, so we were dating long distance. And every time I would go to LA, I loved it so much. To me, it really felt like almost like a getaway, you know what I mean? I had to just get away from my hustle life in AZ and have a trip to LA. And I just found a lot of peace there. And he introduced me to his family, and his family was so amazing, has been so amazing too till this day. And they were they had a huge heart for Christ, especially his mom. So I just remember, when I met them, his family would pray together. They would invite me to church. His mom would share stories about the Bible with me every time I would go there, and they just really invited me into their lives. And they never forced anything on me. I felt like I just really saw their faith, through their kindness, their love, and how they treated each other. And at this time, I also remember, having a lot of conversations with my boyfriend about all the gods that I grew up worshiping, and I used to tell him about it, and he used to share about the Bible with me. And when he used to, talk about Christianity and everything, it still felt very unfamiliar to me. It still was very foreign to me. I wouldn't say I wasn't too into it, but I wasn't, closed off as well. Yeah. I used to listen with an open heart. And, what I really love about them was they never judged me or shamed me or anything or forced me to convert, from my religion. and I just really like kept seeing their faith in action, which, slowly planted a seed in my heart. There was just a different sense of peace that I really couldn't describe, which I now know in the future. But yeah. So yeah, but then, like I said, after that, I would always have to go back to my life in AZ, and I worked too much. It was just too much for me, and I finally allowed myself to take a break, and I decided to go visit my family back in Nepal. It had been almost 10 years now that I hadn't seen them, so I was really excited. I was really excited to see my grandma and my cousins, and yeah, so I took a trip back to Nepal, and when I landed there, it was amazing. I really missed my family. I really missed everyone, and I was just having I was having such a good time. I was having such a good time. I love them so much. Um, it was funny because this time when I landed in Nepal, it felt different than before. I wasn't a little kid anymore, so I was really more aware of my surroundings. And especially my home. Like everything in my home, like really reminded me of my mom even more. Because I noticed a lot of her things were in my dad's room. So I started thinking about her a little bit more. And to my surprise, at this time, my grandma actually started speaking about her. That caught me really off guard. She started showing me all these photos of her and just started speaking about her, about how she was and how kind she was and how good of a heart she had and all these things. And then, when I first heard this, I felt comforted. Like, okay, she was real. I wasn't crazy for missing her. Part of me felt angry because, like, why did it take this long for someone to, like, say her name and talk about her with me? And part of me also felt very uncomfortable because I didn't know how to receive that information. So I really felt warmth and heartbreak at the same time. And at this time, it wasn't just grief that I was starting to feel more. It was also this discomfort that I started feeling inside of me. I couldn't really name it at that time. I don't know what was kind of going on, but I remember I didn't, like, some was off, but I just couldn't name it. Especially, when I was looking at when I was taking a closer look at all the gods that was in my house and all the temples that I was visiting and all the statues that I was looking at, like, it didn't feel peaceful to me anymore. Like, I felt a discomfort. Like I said, I didn't, like, I was kind of low-key scared. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, when I was looking at these statues, like, it was, like, scary looking. And then I also, like, remember in those times when I was really staring at these statues, like, wow, like, even when I was a little kid, I remember I didn't used to like these statues. Like, I remember when I was a little kid, I never used to make eye contact with these gods because I was scared and I didn't know why. Like, so it kind of just, that was something that clicked a little bit in my head. And so yeah, so that all that was happening. But other than that, and then I was also visiting psychics and palm readers at this time too. Like, I was also heavily into that ever since I was a little kid. So even visiting them didn't feel the best. I didn't really like enjoy it how I would used to. So that didn't feel the most good either. So my discomfort was there as well. Um, but yeah, so other than that, I was having a really good time. I was having a really good time with my family and everything. And just when, I thought I was having a break and enjoying life for a second, it quickly became my breaking point. So this one night, me and my sister, we were coming back home and our cousins were dropping us off. And like I said, we all like ride in motorbikes. So I remember I was in one motorbike and my sister was in another, and it was at nighttime. I think it was like around 11 p.m. So it was really dark. There wasn't much street lights. And then I just remember we were riding home and I just hear this loud scream from my sister from the other side. And I just hear the motorbike just swerve. And then I see my sister fly off the bike and hit her head straight in the ground. That was such a traumatizing thing for me to witness. And I just remember me and my cousin, we stopped real quick, and then I was running up to her, and then I just see her just unconscious on the floor. Yeah, she was super unconscious. She wasn't waking up. And then soon, like, a lot of people started like circling us, and fortunately, there was a car that pulled up and offered us a ride to the hospital. And I just remember being in the back seat of the car, and I'm just like holding her in my arms, and I'm just sobbing, and I'm just in shock, and I'm just panicking. Like, I've never seen my sister in a state like that. I've never experienced anything like this. It literally felt like a movie for a little bit. It was the most scariest time of my life. And we reached the hospital. She's in there, and then next day, we got a really bad news. The doctors told us that she had multiple skull fractures, she had critical brain injuries, and that she was placed in the ICU. And the doctors told us that she was also on the verge of having bleeding in her brain. When I, heard that, I didn't really know how to take that information. I went to the hospital. I was so afraid to go inside the ICU. I've never been in an ICU before, and I was so scared to go there. But I finally, I honestly, I didn't even want to go, but I had to see her, and I built up the courage to go see her, and just seeing my sister, just how wounded she looked, and how like she was just unconscious, and just seeing her in a state like that was definitely the most helpless moments of my life. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of me. I really, it really brought back the same fear that I had carried when I lost my mom. And my sister was all I had, after her. So really thought that she wasn't gonna make it and I was gonna lose her too. So I was so scared and so helpless. And that was the first time I actually thought about God. That was the first time ever I was so desperate and so hopeless that I decided to pray. And but I remember, I wasn't this when I had prayed to God for her life. I remember I wasn't really praying to all the gods I worshipped, and then I also wasn't praying to Jesus. I was just praying to God just in my mind. But I just remember I was desperately praying for her life. I desperately, asked him not to take her away from me and to just heal her. And God is so good, guys. Like, I didn't even know who I was praying to, but he answered my prayer. He answered my prayer. He is so good. One day later, after that prayer, she was released from the ICU to go into a regular ward. 3 days later, she opened her eyes, and a week later, she was released from the hospital. Yeah. I mean, to me, I felt like one day she was in a coma and unconscious and unresponsive, and the next day she was healing so fast. And just the speed of her recovery, like, it felt like a miracle to me. I was I was just shocked. I knew that whoever I had prayed to answered it. I knew that it was my prayer. And at this time, so many people were praying for me too. I remember my boyfriend and his family were sending me prayers and Bible verses too. But when God saved her life that day, that was the time when I became curious about God. I didn't know Jesus yet, but that opened up something within me. Yeah, so after that, we took her back home, and I was stuck in Nepal after that for almost half a year. My plan was to only go to Nepal for a month, but I got stuck there because she had to recover, good enough for her to take a flight. So recovery wasn't easy. My sister was under a lot of medications, so she was giving me a little hard time. I remember at that time, so I remember I was kind of like really angry on the inside as well. I felt like I was going to Nepal to take a break, and then, next thing you know, I became a caregiver, and I was still so traumatized by what I saw and experienced for that week that, I was trying to be strong for her, but I was also, feeling all these ways inside of me. I also started realizing that I was carrying a lot of anger and bitterness and pain from my friendships as well. But I was very confused at the same time, because I loved these girls so much, and I just couldn't really understand all these thoughts and feelings that I was feeling inside of me towards them. And I was like, there's no way, I just didn't want to come into terms that of how I was really feeling inside. So, my heart was really trying to speak to me, but I kept shutting it down, or I kept distracting myself. I was starting to feel a little bit disturbed on the inside, but I was just not willing to listen to myself. But fast forward, my sister was recovered enough to take a flight. So she took a she took a flight, and then now my dad was taking care of her in Arizona. And at this time, I remember I was, asking God and praying to God again, not knowing who I was really praying to. But I kind of started talking with him a little bit more. And I remember asking, like, I wonder what I should do next, God. Like, what should be my next plan? What should I do next? Because I felt a little lost. And I had a nudge in my heart to go to LA. And then, I also had my boyfriend there, so I felt a little safe making that decision. So after that 6-month trip, I decided to move to LA for a fresh start. But this is when I really hit my lowest point. I arrived with no job, no car, little to no savings, and just one suitcase with all my stuff. I had no direction whatsoever, and I was absolutely scared and lost. And that's when I fell into depression. At that time, I really felt like all of the weight of my trauma just caught up with me. You know, this was really the first time that I was isolated. I was away from my family, my friends, and everything familiar to me in AZ. So it really felt like I couldn't hide from myself anymore. I wasn't distracted anymore. And everything that I had been suppressing my whole life came out all at once. I started realizing how much I missed my mom and how much I had suppressed her and tried to forget about her. I started feeling her grief more and more, and in a way where I had never felt before. Like, I really started to realize, like, dang, I lost my mom. I didn't understand how deep that was. I started thinking about, how life could have been if she was still around. I started thinking about how unprotected I was because she wasn't around. I started thinking about how much love and comfort I missed out on. So I really felt like, she was stolen from me, like she was just snatched out of my life, and how unfair it really felt. So I started feeling all these grief and anger and everything. I felt really guilty because I felt like, I let my dad down. So that didn't feel good. Like I said, I felt like I owed him a better life, and now I'm over here. I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I can't take care of him. So I carried a heavy guilt towards that. And I really started thinking about my sister's accident as well. I feel like I was having PTSD. Like, the scene just kept, replaying in my head, and I really started having fear of death. So I was getting really anxious about that. I remember I also started having even more intense feelings about my friendships. I started realizing how much, disrespect I really took for so many years. I just really couldn't, believe, why did I allow it for so long? Why did I not ever stand up for myself, right? And I just felt so bad. I just felt so bad. And it was just like a disbelief at the same time. I never chose myself. I never ever chose myself. Always choosing other people above me and not trying to hurt their feelings. So unfortunately, after some back and forth conversations, I actually decided to let my friends go. And that was a really hard time for me. That was definitely one of the most hardest decisions I really had to make. So I was really grieving them really hard as well, because I really thought they were my forever friends. I never thought about losing them. So I was just feeling everything, and I just felt very, very lonely. I remember having really, really dark thoughts, and I was constantly having nightmares. And I remember, saying that my soul just felt so dark. It just felt so dark and heavy, I couldn't explain it. So, in my darkest season, my Christian boyfriend and his family really became my lifeline. I remember they would pray over me, they would take me to church, and really encourage me. His mom would make me meals, and they were just so good to me at those times. I would always just cry with them. And that year, that Christmas, I actually got my first ever Bible. His mom gifted me my first ever Bible, and I remember I was very intimidated by it. I didn't really know how I felt. It looked intimidating. I didn't know where to start, so I didn't read it for a while. And after, I think it was about like three or 4 months. It took me that long. It took me 3 or 4 months to finally say, you know what? Let me just try it out. And I opened it. And that's when everything changed for me. So the Bible was part devotional, and it had devotional love letters from God included. Yep, I know what you're thinking. This is where really my love letter journey started. So, I remember when I read the first letter, I just felt, I was just in awe. I felt so much love and so much comfort just reading that letter. And it was very shocking to me because, I didn't know that God could speak. I had never heard anything in the voice of God, so reading these letters that are in the voice of God was just so new to me and shocking to me, and I had never felt that type of comfort before. So I really felt like I was being loved in a way for the first time that I never knew was possible. So yeah, and then I just, kept reading the letters, and I haven't even gotten to the best part. So after reading about like 15 letters in the span of a week or so, I decide to jump to the book of Matthew and read a letter there. And this, you guys, was my turning point. So, I'm reading the letter, and then the letter was inspired by Matthew 5:14. And this phrase jumps out of me from the letter, and which said, "The invisible God becomes visible through you." And you guys, when I read that phrase, I immediately started crying. I was just bawling, and I couldn't control my tears. Like, I was just crying so hard I couldn't understand it. And then, after that, I read the verse, Matthew 5:14, which reads, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden." And when I read that, I felt this overwhelming presence of just love and light just fill my entire body. It was just the most beautiful experience ever. Like, it literally felt like the warmest hug ever. I'm crying and I feel this presence in me, and in that sacred moment, my soul recognized Jesus. That's when he revealed himself to me. I just it was so amazing. Like, I just knew that it was him. I just knew that it was Jesus. And, it literally felt like God was slowly trying to gain my trust through the other love notes that I was reading. And he was like slowly creeping on me. And then, bam, he just revealed himself to me and gave me this big hug and said, "I am your father. You are safe now. Don't you worry. I understand everything." And I just felt this sense of belonging that I had never felt before. I couldn't explain it. And at that moment, I just knew that Jesus was God. I knew that Jesus was real. I knew that he had my answers. My eyes just opened that day. It really felt like a veil just like lifted off my eyes and I could just see clearly. I was lost and I was found. It really felt like he called me by my name, and it was just the most beautiful experience ever. And something I will never forget. It really, truly was a supernatural experience. And that is when I fully converted to Christianity. That's when I decided that Jesus is my Father, Jesus is my Lord, and he's the true God, and he's the truth and the way and the life. And I just felt this new fire, this new strength within me. And yeah, so that's when I met Jesus. Uh, it it was a beautiful experience. I actually want to add why that verse spoke to me so much, because like I said, God is very personal. He really, speaks to you personally and hits you with something that's, deep for you, something that only you will understand. So, the verse, "You are the light of the world," hit me deep because, my whole life I have really had this heart for people, especially for the lost, the unseen, and the hurt. And I've always had this urge of helping people, and I just feel their pain, And I've always went out of my way for people and for strangers and for homeless people. Like, I just really want to just like help anyone I can. So I just remember my whole life, people coming up to me and they would open up to me, they would cry to me, and everyone would always say, like, there's something about you, like, there's something different about you, like, I feel safe with you, and you are such a light. And they used to use that word a lot. Like, I heard light most of my life. And, I didn't really think of it as much back then, but that's, when I read the verse, like, that's why it hit me so hard, because I was like, wow, this whole time they were seeing Jesus through me. I was not the light. Like, God was the light that they were seeing through me. And that just was so special to me and so beautiful to me, because it really made me realize how God has never left my side. Even when I didn't know him, he has always been with me. And just like he says in his word, he keeps pursuing you and keeps knocking on your door of your heart, and you just gotta open it. That's how it really felt. Like, when you really finally know God, you realize that he's just been with you this whole time. So, yeah. So that's why that verse was very special to me. So after that encounter with Jesus, I became so curious. I was like, all right, I want to know God. I want to know everything about him. I want to know everything about my Heavenly Father. Like, I just want to know you. And so I started reading the Bible every single day. And at this point, I was like really in the Word. No one was teaching me. God was just really, God was teaching me, I was really teaching myself. But I was so curious and so interested. Like, everything I was reading was fascinating. Like, I was, feeling all this love and comfort. The more I read, the more seen I felt. And God was just like showing me so many things, He was healing me. He was changing how I saw everything. He was really changing my perspective and making me see things through his eyes, not through mine. And so he was, really showing me a lot of things, especially about myself. He showed me how much I had silenced myself my whole life, and I slowly started finding my voice. He showed me that your emotions are a gift. Never like run away from how you feel. Like, really listen to yourself. And yeah, like, every day I read, the more alive I felt. And this is when I felt the nudge in my heart to share devotional love notes on social media. And this is where my journey began with the Love Notes from God series. I remember I didn't feel qualified. I was still healing. I was still learning about the Bible. I didn't have any fancy equipments. I did not feel ready at all. But, all I had was this new fire, this new strength from God. And I just said, okay, I'm going to do this. And yeah, so I started speaking in the voice of God through the love notes. And to my surprise, it started reaching people very, very fast. And I started receiving so many messages from so many people of how it was like helping them and how God was really speaking to them through those messages. And I was like, wow, like, God is using me. It was just so beautiful. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. Like, So, I just, and then I just never expected doing social media either. So all of that was new to me. So I was really having, I really enjoyed spreading the word of God. And so, I just kept doing it every single day. And through that, my relationship with God started growing more and more. We used to talk so much every single day, like just talking to Him like a friend. I started leaning on Him more, and just trusting Him every single day. And next thing you know, God gave me a platform, and He was just showing me my purpose, and God was just speaking to me in so many ways and just revealing all these things to me. It was just a beautiful faith journey. And that's when Rose Renuu actually originated as well. My name is Rose, and my mom's name is Renuu. Rose Renuu. Yeah, I didn't get enough time with her in this lifetime, but I got enough love from her to last my whole life. And Rose Renuu is my way of honoring her and taking her with me in this journey. So yeah. So fast forward 2 years later today, I am a full-time content creator, and I still write and share devotional love notes from God that are rooted in scripture and everything that God has shown me and taught me through all these years. It has been such an honor and a blessing to share the truth and the love of Jesus in a way that brings comfort, clarity, and healing to everyone. God's been using my voice that I was once so afraid to use. God's been using my pain to heal others. And today, all glory to God, I no longer live in the prison of guilt, bitterness, regret, shame, anger, pain, searching, and confusion. I live in freedom and peace. I gave it all to God and forgave everyone in my life. I honor my emotions now. I listen to myself. I still have a soft heart, but I move with discernment. And yeah, if He can turn my story around, He can do the same for you. So I plan to continue using my platforms to glorify God, and especially as a first Christian in my family line, I take my role very, very seriously, and I, pray that God touches my family here and in Nepal, and I would really appreciate your guys' prayers as well. So thank you in advance. But yeah, guys, that is my testimony. God has been so good, and He's still so good. He's still doing great things in my life, and I have so many great things planned for 2026, and I would love for you to be a part of it starting today. So if my story spoke to you, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel and just, join me in this journey. I would love to have you. And yeah, I guess that is it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I really hope it spoke to you, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day or night, and God bless you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!